mamela le amogetše go Leihlo la Sechaba le bitso la ka ke nna Lethabo le Joy la ga Mathato dibekeng tša go feta mafelong a mangwe toropong kgolo ya Gauteng a ile a itemogela tlhokego ya meetse re nyakišiša seo se tlhotšego bothata bo
lenyaga toropo kgolo ya Johannesburg le mafelo a mangwe a ile a itemogela tlhaelelo ya meetse.
Remember, rainwater, we are a bulk water utility. We supply bo masipala ka metsi, ha re supply the households dintlu.
They'll get that notification that the water tank is here and you have to rush to get that water because if you miss it, you're without water.
We're now sitting with water shortage due to anthropogenic factors, which is unfortunately reactive planning or poor planning, and then also reactive management.
Cannot afford where we have residents stealing water. People will break, infrastructure, water meters. A lot of, scrupulous customers bypass our meters, and those are not accounted for.
Dikgweding tša go feta toropo kgolo ya Johannesburg le mafelo a mangwe a ile a itemogela tlhokego ya meetse la mathomo mmušong wa demokrasi. Tlhokego ye ile ya gapeletša lekala la taolo ya meetse la rainwater go fokotša kabo go ya go mebasepala megolo wa Tshwane Ekurhuleni ge e šita le wa Johannesburg.
Remember, rainwater, we are a bulk water utility. We supply bo masipala ka metsi, ha re supply the households dintlu. So rona re liftile for bo masipala. Bo masipala ba tla etsa decision bona.
Ga jwalo rainwater e fedišitše dikiletšo. Upša mokgotla wa tša tikologo le mananeo kgoparara masepaleng wa Johannesburg Michael Sand o re dikiletšo go tšwa go masepala go ya go badudi ga se ešo di fedišwa go mo ipeletše go setšhaba go šomiša meetse ka tlhoko.
Rainwater has certainly uplifted its water restrictions from a level 2, but Johannesburg Water has maintained its level 1 water restrictions. So we still need to bear in mind that although there's a lot of rain and natural water coming into our waterways, that process of purification and distribution still needs to take place until we get a stable stage where we are able to say to our residents that we are comfortable that we can uplift completely on the water restrictions.
Seo se be se hlolwa ke mabaka a mmalwa.
Ke mabakanyana a mangata a entseng hore re be le level 2 or stage 2 restrictions. La pele ke tshebediso e kgolo ya metsi, batho ba sebedisa metsi a haholo. Ra tseba hore ha re tswa mariheng re kena ho nako ya spring, batho ba tshela di gardens tsa bona ka metsi, batho ba fela di swimming pools, batho ba hlatswa di pavements tsa bona ka metsi, le ka nako e pula ne santsane e soka ena, so di reservoirs tsa rona ne ntse di rana low, so ne re sa batle ho riska integrity ya di reservoirs tsa rona. So for that reason re ra etla le di stage 2 gore batho ba sebedise metsi ka tshwanelo, rata hape le flow control e le ke buang ka yona gore re kgone ho manage metsi from our side.
Ka ge ba tseba gore tše dingwe tša dipipe di a dutla ba ile ba bolešana le mebasepala gore di lokišwe.
Ra dula le bona, re ba le dikopano le bona. O tla hopola, without speaking on behalf of Joburg Water le City of Johannesburg, matsatsing a ho feta re bone hore budget e ntshitswe ya infrastructure mo tlo lokiswang teng.
Setsebi sa tša merero ya tša meetse go tšwa University ya Afrika Borwa Professor Anja Du Plessis o bona tlhokego ye ya meetse e hlolwa ke lenaneo la mafarahlahla leo le onetšego.
We have 41% of water that gets lost before it reaches the consumer. So the consumer, even though usage was above average due to the heat waves that we were experiencing, that was not the sole cause of the current crisis that we're sitting in with now. It's a combination of poor planning, it's a combination of dilapidated infrastructure that is more than 2 decades old, which hasn't been maintained, which hasn't been upgraded. And then you also sit with the issue of ongoing blackouts due to Eskom, which then influences the backup power of pump stations. If there's no power and if there's no generators to keep the pumps going, water cannot be pumped towards the reservoirs and it cannot be pumped towards consumers.
Lebaka le le letse hore be le restrictions, stage 2 restrictions, ke di-leaks ra tseba hore di-pipes tsa masepala di a leak. I mean, re hlola re bona re tsamaya tseleng ho ba le metsi mo re fetang teng. Metsi ao ha tswile ho rona a tswile e le metsi a hlatsitsweng e le metsi a tshwanetse a sebediswe empa a fella tseleng ha felle mo tshwanetse a ye teng.
Professor Du Plessis o re metsi a gona ka matamong e upša ga gona le maano le dikgopolo tša maphefo gore metsi ao a ye setšhabeng.
Joburg is a very good example of a perfect storm in terms of the city experiencing water shortages, even though the Vaal integrated system is full. The system is now sitting at 91.6%. So there is an abundance of water within the catchments, within the dams. So there's no physical water shortage. We're now sitting with water shortage due to anthropogenic factors, which is unfortunately reactive planning or poor planning, and then also reactive management.
Ka tlhago Afrika Borwa ga ena le metsi ao a lekanego. E upša tšhilafalo ya leratadima le yona e tšea karolo e kgolo tlhokegong ya metsi.
First of all, we have to remember that the country is a water scarce country. Our climate is arid to semi-arid, so we are naturally water scarce, which is our first issue. However, the rest of the issues are basically driven by human factors. The primary issues that we are experiencing now is widespread pollution, which is salinization, eutrophication, acidification, you've got sedimentation, and you've got microbial pollution, which is sewage pollution. And then we also have the major issue of lack of service delivery and services towards especially people living in rural areas.
Du Plessis o re bothata jwa metsi jo bo bileng gona ka Cape Town mengwageng ya go feta bo bo swanetše go ba bobutši mahlo ba taolo ya tša metsi.
One would think that the water crisis experience within the city of Cape Town, where they almost reached day zero, would have served as a warning for government as well as local government to try and address their current management practices and try to incorporate improvements into that. However, it doesn't seem like that has been done, especially with the Gauteng province still now sitting with intermittent water supply. In terms of local governments, most of them have been declared as non-functioning. Some of them are insolvent financially. Some of them don't spend the budgets that they have, and others overspend. So you have a misappropriation of funds, that's a major issue. But then also the continued issue of human capacity as well as people with the required skills and knowledge which will be able to lead water management practices within the country.
Tlhokego ya metsi ile ya gapeletša ba mmasepala mogolo wa Johannesburg go romela dilori gore di šetše badudi metsi go akaretšwa le ka lekeišeneng la Coronationville ka ntlenyana ga toropokgolo ya Johannesburg.
In our area, we didn't have water for, I think, a period of 2 months. Where, if I say no water, the water was more intermittent. So we'll get waters come on about 12 o'clock at night, and it's on for a short period. Morning hours, there's no water, up to a point where there was literally no water at all. And Johannesburg Water started dispensing water trucks out into our communities. And my son would then go out, and I would also go out and help him at sometimes to get water. And we would carry the water from the water tankers.
go be go sena le yo a tsebang gore lori yeo e tlo boa nako mang letšatšing la go latela.
Now the water tankers would come and they would park in the main road, just here outside. And what they would do is they would hoot. So they'll get that notification that the water tank is here, and you have to rush to get that water, because if you miss it, you're without water. Then you have to wait again until tomorrow afternoon, evening, because they only come late afternoons. So during the day, if you are at home and you've got children and all of that, you need water. So if you miss that water tanker, you have a problem. And so when we hear the hoot and people will shout, our community will say, hey, the tank is here, the tank is here. And then everyone's rushing and queuing to fill up the buckets, the bottles, whatever we can, just to make sure that we've got water to keep us through the night and through the next day. And we never knew what time the water tanker would come. We'll just wait to hear when that hooting comes, and then we know the tanker is here.
ka la 12 kgweding ya Oktoboro lori yeo ya Meetsi ile ba tlišetša mahloko.
The tanker came, hooted, and they said the water tank is here. And I asked my son, I said to him, do you want me to go fetch? Because he wasn't feeling well. I said, I can go fetch the water. And he says, no, Dad, it's fine. I'll go get the water.
Fabian Sass o re morwa wa gagwe Ethan o ile a tšwa le pakete jwalo ka setlwaedi go ya go ga Meetsi loring yeo eupša ka morago a kwa lešata ge a ukamela a ba a bethwa ke letswalo.
He crossed the road with the bucket, and when he got there to fill up the bucket, and as he turned, he didn't even try and cross the road yet, he just turned. As he turned, and this is what my neighbors are saying that was there, he just turned, and this taxi came flying up in the rear via lane, and he shot across in the speeding lane and bumped my son. And I was sitting here in the house, and I actually heard that knock, and I jumped up, and as I was coming out to see, the children were running to me and saying, Uncle Fabian, it's Ethan. And sure, I got a big fright.
Ge a fihla ka ntle o hweditše morwa wa gagwe a thutšwe ke sefatanaga a dutla madi wa go šiša.
I got there and I was looking at my son and seeing the state that my son is in. Blood was coming out from his eyes, blood from the nose, the mouth, the ears, and he's just laying there. And the first thing I thought of is just run home. I got my car, got my first aid kit because I used to be a paramedic. I drove around and I got there and I put a neck brace on him. And I had to make a decision as a father there. I said, I can't wait for an ambulance because I could already hear that my son is struggling to breathe. I lifted my son up. I got people to help me. We put my son in the car and I rushed him to Helen Joseph. When we got to Helen Joseph, we went straight through into the resus room. And when we got there, the doctors there, and I called and I said to them, please help me, my son. I don't think my son is breathing properly. And immediately the doctors came out in resus and they tubed him and they took him in. And the doctor came and said it was a good thing that you played so fast, because at that time, just what they could pick up, they said to me, his one lung is punctured already. And I was like, oh, thank God. But at the same time, I was also praying and worrying, because I had to make a decision as a father, life over limb. And because I lifted up my son and I put him in the car, I was worried now. My son got knocked by a taxi. Maybe his spine is fractured or something, you know. what's going on. But my first instinct was my son needs to live.
seemo sa morwa wa gagwe se ile sa befa go ya pele.
Surgical doctor came out and said, in actual fact, both of your son's both lungs is collapsed. Then they explained to us he's got fractures at the back, he's got facial fractures, his jaw is broken. So those are the things that they picked up at Ellen Joseph. But then they couldn't move him into any ward or anything because my son is 13 years old. We only learned that at Ellen Joseph, that Ellen Joseph and Raima Musa, which is just down the road from me, they don't have a pediatric ICU. So they had to now phone around and try to see where they can get a available bed for my son between Joburg Gen and Baragwanath Hospital. So what they did at Ellen Joseph, they made a makeshift ICU to try and keep my son alive and treat him as much as they could. I think it was the second day, the evening, Friday evening, yes, 11:30, we got the phone call, come to the hospital. We've managed to get the critical care ambulance, and the critical care ambulance was going to take my son now to Baragwanath Pediatric ICU. When we got to the pediatric ICU there was a team of specialists, and they saw my son, and then they did a thorough check on Ethan. They found that the assessments thus far was right, but my son has got severe brain damage, swelling on the brain, facial fractures, the jaw's broken, both lungs were collapsed. His heart, because of the high-speed impact, his heart was bruised, his spleen was bruised, and they also found that his pelvis on both sides were fractured.
Ka bomadimabe Ethan o ile a tlogela lefase le.
This is his latest one. This was the provincial OR Tambo Sonsini social games that they had, and he was presented this by the Gauteng province, and he was extremely proud.
Sas ore o ile a kgopela gore go dirwe mebotwana yeo e gapeletšago gore difatanaga di fokotše lebelo eupša le lekgono o sa letile.
We've written to the city of Joburg countless times where we've voiced our opinion and said, please put in speed humps, put in speed breakers just to slow down the traffic. This is a community. The MMC of transport was here. And when he was standing outside, he was shocked to see how the Ria Vaya buses are speeding past here.
Go rarolla bothata jwa Meetsi go rarolla le Johannesburg, masepala o na le leano leo le sa hlahlwago.
We do have a policy in place that's still going through its process. Once it has been passed, there will be a formal policy of the city that we'll be able to engage the residents with and say, this is what we're going to do in terms of providing services. This is what we want everybody to do in terms of facing a water scarcity issue, and of course in the case of a drought, what do we do? And of course long before we get to a day 0 situation, call it a day 90, day 60 situation, we're able to initiate those emergency measures to ensure that our residents don't have to go stand by a tap to collect water. So these are all the steps that we have implemented. We certainly will be processing that plan very soon, and once it's gone through the council process, we will publish it and share it with our residents.
Ore bana gape le mano a go thibela go utsiwa ga meetsi.
Cannot afford where we have residents stealing water. People will break, infrastructure, water meters and so on. A lot of, scrupulous customers bypass our meters, and those are not accounted for. And again, those fall into that bracket of the non-technical and technical loss. We have programs to ensure that we enforce those kind of illegal behavior. We have programs where we go out and educate and bring awareness campaigns to residents to say, please don't bypass the meters because you will be penalized. We want you to please work with us, use what you, pay what you use, and of course, use whatever you get sparingly and wisely.
Rent water le yona e na le kwano le Eskom gore ge Eskom e timela badudi motlakase e se time mo go fehliwa go metsi.
Re na le tumellano le Eskom gore ba se ba etsa load shedding ho rona ho di stations tsa rona haholo primary station le secondary stations tsa rona gore ba se ba re timela motlakase. Mara ho tertiary pump stations ha rena tumellano le Eskom empa re na le di generators. So di generators tsa rona ha motlakase o tima tsona they kick in and then ra qala ho pumpa metsi. Ra tseba hore o tlo pumpe metsi o hloka motlakase.
When we have load shedding in our area, then Hurstville Reservoir doesn't have the capacity to pump enough water. And where we situated, as we were explained by City Council, is that Coronationville is in a high-lying area. So when the water pumps, the water goes to other areas, but us that's in a high-lying area, we don't have water. And the other places don't experience the vast shortages that we have compared to they still have because they are low-lying areas. Us that's up in the high area, we suffer. It passes us and we suffer the most.
Ka ge rent water e na le kwano le Eskom gore e se hlo e ba timela motlakase, putisho ke gore ana badudi ba Coronationville ka ge ba boditse gore lefelo la bona le godimo go metsi a feta ka lebelo, lefelong la bona re tla dula re beile leihlo go bona gore ana ba thušwa jwang.
Ke ka fa re fitla mafelong a lenaneo la rena bošegong ba lekgono netefatša gore ba le rena gape bekeng e tlago mošupologo seripa gare go tšwa go iri ya seswai gona mo go SABC 2 le gopola o ka re ngwalela email go leihlo la setšhaba sabc.co.za goba o ka romela fax go 086 613 1227 rena gape le letlaka la Facebook mo e le gore o ka kgona go ledišana le rena gona gopola mananeo wa rena ka moka o kgona go humana go YouTube go kwa ka lenaneo le latelago o ka le hwetša go Thobela FM Lesedi FM le Motsweding FM mošupologo mesong a e be boroko ba re motšwa gabo ga robale.